Okay, so as you can see right there, I've got a mess of wires inside that 2-gang box there, and I've got a switch hanging outside that box so I could test the lights in here. So what I'm going to be working on next is actually replacing that 2-gang box with a 3-gang box. And the 3-gang box that I've chosen is this Carlon Super Blue rigid box. It's really nice and heavy duty, and it doesn't flex like the other box that I had looked at. The part number on this one, if you're interested, is BH353A, and I got this at Home Depot. The other box was a 44 cubic inch box, whereas this one's 52 cubic inches. And the other box was very flexible, so I was worried about, once I got all the wiring installed in that box, that it would flex on me a little bit and it wouldn't match up with the drywall as easily as this one would. So to calculate what size box I would need, I used the same tool that I'd used for that box over there. And that was the box fill calculator tool. So I put my numbers in there. I've got 14 gauge conductors. So there's 7 cables with 2 conductors each, so that's 14. Then I'll have 3 devices. So I'll have a switch for the main lights, a switch for the fan, and a switch for the recess light. And then my biggest ground wire will be 14 gauge. So if I hit calculate, it tells me that the smallest box I can use is 42 cubic inches. So the 52 cubic inch box that I've chosen should be just fine. Okay, so I've got the new box installed. I just want to take a second to talk through this. And what I did here was I put a level across this box and across the wall here so I could mark the top of this new box. Make sure that these two are in the same plane. It's about 1/8 of an inch off, but it should work out just fine. And to make sure that the front of this box is flush with the new drywall that I'll be putting in, which is 1/2 inch drywall, I could have used the 2 tabs on the side, but these are 7/16 in length, so it's about 1/16 off. So I decided not to use those. And so, like I said, I screwed this drywall up here based on what I saw someone else do. I thought it was a pretty decent idea for somebody who's new at this. And so I've got the drywall screwed up here. These two are matched up and flushed evenly. The 2 nails here, when I went to nail those in here, I started with the top one first and lightly tapped it in. Just made a little indent in the wall. Did the same thing on the bottom one. And just kind of alternated back and forth until I got both nails sunk in here. So that looks pretty good. Okay, so as you can see here, as I've pointed out already, I've got a bunch of staples in here from when the wiring was all installed when the house was first built. And since I'm adding a wire or 2 here, I've decided to go ahead and take these staples out and replace them with one of these multi-cable staples. And I got these at Home Depot, and they come in a package that looks like this. They're about $8 a bag, 20 in a bag. And they have a little tab on them, and this tab fits over the end of the wall stud, kind of like that. And what this does is it centers, by fitting over the end of the wall stud like that, it centers the cables on the stud so that you're in compliance with NEC code. And it's got a couple holes here, one for a nail and one for a screw, so you can secure these staples to the stud. And you can fit up to 8 cables per staple. Okay, so I've got the box installed and I've got most of the wiring completed. I just have to put the switches in. And I've got a good length of wire coming out of the box here, so I can connect everything up easily. I did have to add some extensions to this set of wires here. That's where all the power comes into the box. And I was going to use some push-in connectors that I saw at Home Depot, but I read online that some electricians don't like those, so I just decided to stick with wire nuts there. And the one thing I know is to pay attention to the color of the nuts you use too, because you can only fit a certain amount of wires and wire gauge underneath each nut. So that's all finished there. I have a cable staple there, so that's a multiple cable staple that has 5 cables inside of it there. It's all installed. And up there, there's another one up there that has 3 cables. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to go ahead and put the switches in and see how everything works. Okay, so I've got all 3 switches in there. Those are temporary switches until I put my new ones in. And everything's working great in here. I got the lights on. I wouldn't pan around. Turn the fan on. Fan's working. And then I'll turn the light on back there. That light's working too. So everything looks good. It took a little while to wire this up because there are so many cables in there. I had to use a lot of pigtails. So other than that, everything looks good. Okay, so what I'm doing right now is installing the duct for the bath fan. So there's the port right there. And on the opposite side, on the exterior wall, there's the vent right there. And what they did when they installed this originally is they stuffed a 3-inch flexible hose inside of a 4-inch vent. So that's kind of weird. And then they just took a bunch of duct tape and wrapped it around that. Okay, so I'm going to be using this insulated flexible duct to connect the bath fan to the exhaust vent. And if you recognize it, this is pretty much the same flexible duct that I use for the heat vent underneath the floor. So there's the flexible duct there. And then it's wrapped with this R6 insulation. And from what I've read online, a lot of areas require that you have at least R4 insulation installed to prevent condensation from forming in the ceiling. So that'll work out great. And how this is going to work is I'll peel back the insulation and attach the ducting to the exhaust vent and to the bath fan. And then I'll wrap this foil tape around each one of those flexible duct ends. And then I'll also wrap foil tape around the insulation to secure that to the bath fan and to the exhaust vent. Okay, so I've got the flexible duct installed and that looks pretty good. I've got a lot of foil tape on each end to make sure it's nice and secure and to make sure that it's airtight. And the one thing I wanted to point out is when I apply this foil tape, I have a tendency to take all the backing off, and when I get into really tight spaces I try to fit the tape in there and it crumbles and wrinkles and I have to get a new piece. So I have to remind myself to only take off as much backing as I really need to, and then I gradually peel the rest of it off as I start to apply the tape. Okay, so what I'm doing today is installing the boxes for the sconces that are going to flank the mirror over the vanity. And from what I've read online, the typical measurement to the bottom of a wall sconce in a bathroom is around 65 inches, and I'm probably close to, I'd say, about 63 inches from the finished floor. And the reason why I mounted it that low is because the ceilings in here are only about 7 feet tall, so I didn't want to go too high. So these are the fixtures that I've chosen here. This is a George Kovacs, model number is P5040, and it's in brushed nickel, and it's got a glass cylinder that fits over the light there. Now I've got a couple choices for how I could mount these boxes in this stud bay here. The first thing that occurred to me was to install one of these boxes without the bar hanger. I would just put a 2x in there and then nail this to that 2x. But the one issue I had was, if you notice right there, there are a couple holes, and those holes have to line up with the back of the fixture, so I wasn't quite sure I could get that right and have everything, have it to where the fixture is actually plumb. So I decided not to do that. And also I wanted to give myself the flexibility of being able to slide that box right and left so I can decide where exactly I want to put it horizontally. So that meant that I would actually just keep this box on the bar hanger like you see here. This particular one is BH525H. I got this at Home Depot. It's a Carlon Super Blue box. And this bar supports pretty good weight. I believe the sconces only weigh about 5 pounds, so I'm in good shape there. Okay, so now that I've decided on an installation method, the next thing I'm going to talk through is some of the considerations that come along with mounting this sconce box on the bar hanger. So the first thing I wanted to do was make sure that the front of this box, this face here, is flush with the drywall that I'll be installing. So what I've done here is I've taken a strip of drywall and attached it here, and a strip of drywall and attached it over there. And then I've got this 1x that I've put across those 2 strips of drywall and brought this face of this box to where it's touching the back of this 1x here. So that tells me that it's now flush with the drywall. I've also pulled the bars out to where they're tight in there in that stud bay, and the box can pretty much support itself at this point. The next thing I wanted to do was make sure that the box stayed level, or that the bars in particular stayed level. The reason for that is if I want to manipulate where these boxes are located horizontally, I need to make sure that those bars stay level so that it doesn't kind of do like this when I start to move it. And then I have my heights all screwed up between the box that will be mounted here and the box that will be mounted over there. So what I'll be doing is just using a little level for my combination square to check to make sure that it's level before I go ahead and then screw everything into the stud bay there. Okay, so what I decided to do is just go ahead and mark the locations of the screw holes for the bar hangers on the wall studs, and then I pulled the box out of the stud bay and drilled a few holes, and now I've got the box back in there just to kind of check everything. I'm going to go ahead and pull this brace down so I have a little more space to work. And I'm going to attach the screws. I'm not going to snug them up so I can kind of move the bar around to make sure that everything's level before I firmly screw everything in. Okay, so the first box is in. And as you can see right there, it's fairly level. So I'm just going to go ahead and repeat the same process on that stud bay over there. Okay, so I've got both boxes installed at the same height, and the hanger bars are both level, so that looks pretty good. The next thing to do is just install the wiring, so I'll do that a little bit later. Okay, so what I want to do real quick is talk about my reasoning behind choosing this box versus the metal boxes that I saw in the store. The metal boxes were my preferred choice because they're nice and beefy, and there's really no second thought about whether they're going to be sturdy enough to support a light fixture. But in my case, since my light fixtures are only about 5 pounds, it wasn't that big a deal. The other thing I like about this box is that it's got 2 sets of holes. So one set here and then a set here. And those holes match up perfectly with my wall mount for the sconce, as you can see right there. The problem is these holes are not plumb with each other. They're a little bit offset. So instead of being able to use the outer holes or the holes from another like metal box, because they don't have 2 sets of holes, I have to use these inner holes here so that it matches up with the slots on the wall mount. So I can mount it on here and then I can swivel it to get it to where the fixture is nice and plumb. Okay, so since I'm not going to be wiring up the sconces right now, I just want to give kind of a brief description of how that's going to work. So there's the wire that carries power to the existing fixture. So instead of going to that fixture, it's going to go to this box here first, and then this wire is going to carry power from this box over to the second sconce.